going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting for October 2nd, 2017 to order. As required by open meeting law, I am informing you that we will be video, audio taping, as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience wishing to video or audio tape must notify the chairman now. Hearing no one, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Anyone for weekly briefing?
You know, Michael, might be appropriate a moment of silence for the...
Yes, yes. And we take a moment of silence for all those who were injured or lost their lives in Las Vegas yesterday. Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Public comment and announcement. Consent agenda. We're going to take this up in pieces tonight. So, Larry, will you read A and B, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes for the August 7th, 2017 executive session and the minutes for the September 18, 2017 regular session, and B, approve the recommendation of award for the fiscal year 2018 road salt contract.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve consent agenda A and B. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Go ahead and read C.
And we're taking C separately, and therefore I move the following committee appointments. Council.
No. Hang on one second, Larry.
You want to discuss it?
Yeah,
right?
the reason that
Well, sometimes you make the motion, then discuss.
John, do you want to just make the motion including the dates?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was looking towards.
Larry, is that all right with you?
Sure.
Just for the record, the reason I asked for it to be taken out is, moving forward, we're making substantial progress in fixing all the prior mistakes or appointments. The only way that's going to be maintained is if we make motions that have expiration dates in
No, I
them.
appreciate it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I move that we approve Joan Falahi as a full member of the Council on Aging with a term to expire 6/30/19. Michael Capoli as an alternate member of the Board of Appeals with an expiration of 6/30/19. Angelina Shalaka for the Council on Aging as a full member with an expiration date of 6/30/19. Angelina Shalaka with the Community Center Facilities Committee with a full membership to expire 6/30/18. And Charlie Check as a full member of the Harwich Energy Committee with a term to end 6/30/18.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the committee appointments as read. Any discussion?
I just want to point out that Mr. Check anticipates being away from town a lot and wanted to participate via
Remote
remote,
participation.
yeah, and we do have something in the packet about that. It seemed to me that there was going to be more than 3, though.
I think you're mistaken, Don. He actually was talking about that he bought land recently in one of the Carolinas and is anticipating building a house over the next several years. He will not be participating remotely, from what I understand, during this next year when his expiration date is 6/18. I think he was speaking about the future because he is awaiting our decisions on the parameters for setting committee members for the wastewater support committee.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
For the record, so that if he's watching, which he said he was going to, that he'll hear this, is that should he have unexcused absences and use up the 3 remote access times, he would be subject to the charter requirements for removal if he doesn't have a reason for why he's not showing up.
Right. Thank you. Larry, any comments?
No comment.
Julie?
None.
Yeah, my only comment would be the same. If he's going to be here and he wants to be part of the committee, great. If he's not going to be here, then he shouldn't take the appointment. So if he's watching and he hears it, or when we notify him if he's going to miss more than 3 meetings, he should not take the position. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. D, Larry?
Move we approve the appointment of Amy Banford as Administrative Assistant for the Community Development Department.
Any second? I'll second it for discussion. Any discussion? Don?
I suspect everybody's got their own, well, I know everybody's got their own opinion, and I wouldn't have not seconded it, but my concern has nothing to do with the individual who's being there so long as he or she is not being subject to supervision by an immediate family member. But I've had this conversation with the town administrator, and I'd like to have it agendaed in the future that the process itself doesn't allow us, and I've said this in prior meetings, to allow us to be able to dispose of our duties under the charter to either confirm the appointment or to reject it with a 3/5 vote because we know nothing other than the person who's coming forward. And I think we should have a discussion about that.
Thank you, Don. Janelle?
I agree with what Don said. And also, this just raised a red flag for me because this summer I was told by Michael, actually, that Amy was helping Foster in the IT department. She is his daughter. And Michael told me he had checked into it, and it was just simply a volunteer position. She was helping her father because we decided we wanted to upgrade IT, as she has substantial more experience, and that's her forte. So when I see that she is being appointed as an administrative assistant, which is a low-level, entry-level position in the town hall, it just, for me, raises a little bit of a question as to the process and, you know, who else applied. Obviously, she's very qualified because she has so much experience and education, but I just am wondering about the administrative assistant position being a low level if, you know, she's overqualified, frankly, and if it is just a strategic move to get a job with the town so that when Foster does retire within the next couple of years, she can be the internal candidate and slide right into his position, frankly. That's what I'm concerned about.
Thank you. Julie?
I would agree that, you know, I would like a better understanding of the process, and yet I did read through the packet. I know that there were multiple applicants, but I think that ultimately when this comes to us, it's sort of the first time we're dealing with it. And so to vet it out and vote on it is a little bit difficult, I guess. And I do think she's incredibly qualified for this position, certainly would be for an IT position as well. So I guess I just would like to see the process more clarified before, and the other part of this is that we're voting on something, and I know that it's all, you know, depending on our vote, but I think it would be better for us to have a better understanding, and yet we can't be involved in the daily department head goings on, but I think it would be a better process if we could have more information before we're asked to vote on it.
Larry?
I'm just trying to understand the, by process, I guess we need to look at other applicants more. We have a nominating committee that's screening those. I don't have too much difficulty with hiring someone that may, as you've said, set them up for a later appointment if that's to the welfare of the town. I assume we have a policy where a family relationship can't work directly for another family relationship, so they can't be in the same department, so they're separated in that context. You know, I'm not opposed to this in those regards. You're right. We've all had experience where we've hired possibly someone overqualified, then they get bored with the job and don't do it well, and we have to be careful that's vetted. But I'm not opposed to it per se.
So, Don, I will agenda this for next week.
Thank you.
I do agree with you. You know, I know past practice has been that we have gotten other applicants, and it would stay in a confidential file, so it's not a matter of releasing. So past practice was the town did get the other applicants, and I think it pointed out to me that our highway DPW director was hired after not confirming a certain appointment because a board member at the time saw another applicant and brought it forward. This is not past practice, though, for us not to confirm. And as far as overqualified goes, kind of wish we had everybody overqualified. I don't see a problem with overqualified. As far as the applying for another position internally later, I
Okay,
brought
too.
that up when it happened in the assessing department, and I did look into, as Janelle mentioned, the IT part-time position, to make sure that that wasn't gonna be the case in that department. But I don't think we can vote on speculation. And as far as the administrator goes, the administrator laid out a process that's in your packet. There was 23 applicants. This was an external application, so it wasn't internal. Went through a vetting process, and she was part of final 3 and then ultimately chosen. So I have confidence in our administrator that they did this process correctly, and I certainly would support the confirmation. Don?
Just as a postscript to that, the process I'm talking about has to do with our being able to dispose of the duties of the charter, which wouldn't be an interference of day-to-day because we're specifically granted that authority to either accept or reject a confirmation. So the conversation I'd like to have is that plus we're sending out letters to people as soon as the appointment's made with the presumption that it's going to be affirmed. And I feel really awkward taking a vote if we do have to reject somebody when they've already gotten an offer letter.
So I will agenda. As said, we will discuss the process. Right now, we have a motion before us to confirm the appointment of Amy Banford.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on that? It's been moved and seconded, so any other discussion?
Just very briefly, what's the end point then? We're on the process. We're going to try to outline that they don't send the letter out immediately. Are there other, I mean, I'm just trying to see where we're.
That's for next week.
Yeah, I'll take
No,
that.
but I mean, just, I think we need
think
an
Don-
end point. We don't need to discuss it now, but we should.
Right.
agree on
Don's,
what the-
Don's question is that we should be, or that it's been past practice, and his
The
question is
finalists.
that we have the ability to look at the other applicants and make a fair decision on whether we want to confirm it or not.
Great.
Jury's out on that for me, because I think confirmation is, we're taking our administrator's recommendation and the search team's recommendation, but we'll
I'm
have
just-
that conversation
I'm
next
just
week.
trying to understand where we're going.
Any other conversation? All in favor of the appointment?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4-1. Thank you. Next up, Larry E., Town Hall hours, and with the board's permission, I'd like to go back to Chris with this. He put it in our packet with some dates and said recommendation. He hasn't made recommendation why. I looked at the dates and did some phone calls today to see what other towns' practices are, and it doesn't seem to be common practice. He didn't give any explanation on it.
If I might,
Go ahead.
Charlene, just before that, let me read the motion so people at home
okay,
Go ahead.
will know. The motion is town hall hours, and we're considering Veterans Day and Thanksgiving. I just want to be sure.
okay.
Thank you for the.
Go ahead.
If I might, Veterans Day this year falls on a Saturday. So based on state of Massachusetts laws, we celebrate the holiday on the Friday. So all of town will have Friday, the 10th off. Friday for town hall employees is a half a day. So contractually, we are obligated to give the town hall employees the same amount of time off as all other employees. So having town hall close at 4 on that Monday of that week would allow for that 3.5 hours that the employees are going to lose on Friday because they only work a half a day on Friday. I hope that was clear.
No, that is clear, and that would be the information that I would hope that Chris would put in our packet, so we don't have to have this conversation. I didn't see the, well, I see the dates,
He doesn't have the
not the explanation.
Oh.
Okay, so that's one of the dates. Charlene, do you have an explanation on the other date?
And then on Thanksgiving week, and this has been a past practice for Thanksgiving week, the town hall would work till 8 o'clock on the Monday of Thanksgiving. The contract does provide that they would work only till 4 o'clock. It has been the past practice that people would prefer to have half a day before Thanksgiving off so that they can prepare whatever they need to do or travel or what have you. for Thanksgiving. So it has been a past practice that Town Hall would be open until 8 o'clock on Monday, and then on, excuse me, and then on Wednesday would close at noon, rather than working 8:30 to 4, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So Thanksgiving's a Thursday this year.
Yeah.
So they would have Thursday off, Friday off, Monday, Saturday, and Sunday off because it's a weekend.
And Monday with their-
until 4?
No. The Monday of the week of Thanksgiving, we would work till 8 o'clock, and then the next week, we go back to normal again.
Question about that.
Janelle?
So, but Charlene, normally Mondays are 8 o'clock. I was thinking that
Right, in the-
perhaps this was because of the Friday.
No.
So how does it
In
work
all-
again?
In all the contracts, and in the personnel bylaw, Friday is considered a selectman's holiday. So Thursday is off because of Thanksgiving, Friday's off because you,
That's what the AGA chose.
that's, well, it's in all the contracts.
Okay.
Except perhaps for police and fire, but they're always a little bit different. So the way the contract, and they're different for reasons because they're public safety, that, you know. So what the contract says is the week of Thanksgiving, town hall employees will work an 8:30 to 4 schedule, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the week of Thanksgiving.
Gotcha.
However, in the past, and, you know, recent past practice, and frankly, as long as I can remember that we've actually been open till 8 o'clock on Monday, employees have asked, well, can we, instead of working until 4 on Monday, we'll work our regular till 8 o'clock on Monday if we can have the half-day on Wednesday. So it's still the same number of days. It's still a 21-hour week that employees will be working.
Okay. Does the board want to vote on this?
Sure, I do.
Yep.
Go ahead and make a motion, Larry.
I move we adopt the recommendations presented by the town administrator for the town hall hours for Veterans Day and Thanksgiving.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Charlene, for the
you.
explanation. Next up, public hearings and presentations. So Monomoy Regional School District meeting with the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee to discuss enrollments by class and demographics. The information is in our packet tonight. Scott Carpenter, the school superintendent, had a conflict, so he was unable to make the meeting. He will be at the next meeting, and we will make a joint meeting at that point. But for the public, tonight it is in the packet to read, but Monomoy will not be joining us. And I imagine, Jack, you must have got the same note since the bulk of the Finance Committee is not here? Yes. Thank you. But I will entertain, since it is in the packet, and it is an agended item, if the board has comments on it or wants to speak about it. Larry?
Just a brief comment. This is a great presentation of enrollment information. Is the meeting next week, will that include preliminary financial information?
No.
To start that discussion? But that'll come later then?
Yes.
Okay.
Julie?
One thing, it is full of information, it's very helpful. The one thing I think we should all take notice of is the fact that the elementary numbers are slightly down, and the superintendent makes a point of explaining that that is because of the dwindling number of young families on Cape Cod, and we should be looking at that seriously and trying to figure out what we're going to do, and I know we're all working towards that, but just to point that out to the public, that we're seeing the numbers, so.
Thank you. Janelle?
Yeah, agreed. So the other thing that I thought was refreshing in this was the Superintendent Carpenter's apparent support for universal preschool. That's really important. I don't think Chatham has preschool, but I'm not positive. But Harwich has 2 different preschool programs that are both phenomenal programs, and it would be really great if everybody in town were able to access those. It's at this point, it's a lottery.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would have been helpful in this thing to have a matrix, to be honest with you, because you have to go into the text to find what's going on with Nauset. And if you look at the text, it doesn't tell you anything about what's going on with the charter school. The word is negligible. So if he comes next week, I'd like to just have like a graph, you know, of each school, and then who's going where and who's coming out and who's going in,
Well, there was.
including their charter school, the Lighthouse and Sturgis, because it's pertinent to the discussion.
Larry?
Yeah, I thought but I just wanted to come back to Nels. Could we ask, because I think the school has much more information we do, what other areas of the country are doing on preschool? Because I think that's a very common, I'm going to say thing, that's not a right term, but preschool is commonly offered in, as far as I know, a lot of different areas of the country. It'd be nice to know where we line up just with the Cape, just in general.
He references Mashpee, which offers it, and I believe Wellfleet also.
Charlene, can we have staff send a note to the school asking for those two things?
I will. I just want to clarify, if I can, Mr. Howell. So you want something more than the information provided on pages 19 and 20?
Not more, just in a way that you can see the comparison a little better.
Okay.
Anything else? Moving on to the, go
Can I
ahead.
just say one thing? It does, and again, going back to some of the data here, it does give us info on Sturgis. I don't see anything on Lighthouse. So I just want to point that out.
And what grade that would affect, because the Lighthouse Charter School doesn't have the concurrent grade structure to our schools.
They have 6, 7, and 8.
Right.
Okay, on to our annual meetings with the Selectmen, Waterways Commission.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Matt Hart, Chairman of the Waterways Committee. The Town of Harwich Waterways Committee has had another interesting plus successful year of progress thanks to the efforts of the Harwich residents, the Harbor Master Department, Natural Resource Department, Waterways Committee, and the, believe it or not, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I would like to thank the Bourne Engineering Company for their professional services to the Town of Harwich and the Harbor Master Department for the successful design and approval process of the Saquatucket Marina Replacement Project. The Waterways Committee has worked closely and successfully with boaters, residents, Board of Selectmen, and the Harbor Masters Department to listen to their comments, make suggestions, and work with them to achieve Waterways objectives and goals. The Waterways meetings have been very well attended, and the members' attendance, interaction, participation have been, again, commendable this year. Projects. Apart from the possibility of unexpected inclement weather, the $7 million project to replace the Saquatucket Municipal Marina piles and services include the dredging of approximately 17,000 cubic yards of material from the harbor and is scheduled to be completed and soon after that the dedicated Memorial Day weekend. We hope this will happen. We're concerned. We've had 2 or 3 great winters. We hope it'll happen again this year. As a reminder to the Harwich taxpayers and visitors, the marina upgrade will include a handicap accessible ramp that would bring a new marina into compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. A $1 million Seaport Economic Council grant was received to help fund this major reconstruction project. Specifically, the East Dock section will include the handicapped accessible ramp system for passengers, boats, and commercial fishing slips. But most important, the Harwich taxpayers is the marina replacement project will be funded over a 20-year term with approximately 75% of the debt service paid for by harbor revenues. The progress with the replacement of the Harbor Master Office and the addition of the boardwalk and construction of the Harbor Master Maintenance Facility, along with the relocation of passenger ticketing and the artist shacks and additional vehicle parking for the former Downey property is still moving ahead. This scaled-down version of the original concept that included a restaurant and snack bar classified as an option is the result of having to cut back the scope of the project to stay within the original $3 million budget approved by the residents of the 2017 annual town meeting. Budget. The Harbor Master Department again exceeded previous revenue without any rate changes. The department collected $1,037,227 in revenue for the fiscal year of 2017. Boat slip, dock fees, mooring fees, and related waterway and harbor fees. The Board of Selectmen recently approved a rate increase for the dock, moorings, and related public boating and harbor services that are approximately a 10% increase over the board. Public safety. The past boating season, the harbor master responded to 59 maritime assistant cases, 23 boat tows, I'm all right, 2 groundings, 22 dewatering, 1 person in the water, and support for 6 or 7 miscellaneous events. Dredging. Approximately 11,540 cubic yards of material dredged from Allen Harbor Channel. The beach nourishment material was placed at Gray Neck, Earl Road, Wauwatosa public beaches. Saquatucket Channel and Allen Harbor Channel are scheduled to be dredged again this spring of 2018. In the harbor management plan, 1 elimination of town-managed water boat storage, marina fee schedule adjustment. Respectfully submitted, Matt Hart. Can I help you with anything? Or questions?
Thank you, Matt. Don, questions for Matt?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just, to clarify this, is my memory correct that something went wrong in the dredge this year, that really collected less cubic yardage than we were anticipating? Because the dredge itself had a problem?
Yes, it did. It was a mechanical problem, but they tried to correct that, and they repaired it, and we picked up the slack, yes.
The only reason I'm asking you is it's not in the report, and a lot of non-resident taxpayers were saying, well, how come they didn't do more? You can only put nourishment sand down that you collect. So there was a problem, and we collected less than we were able to within the window that they were collecting it.
You're correct, Mr. Howell. The existing dredge is getting overworked. It's working both sides of Cape Cod, and I understand they're going to add a second dredge.
That's it.
Janelle?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Thank you.
Julie?
I don't have anything. Thank you for the report.
Larry?
Thank you, Matt. As usual, you guys do a good job.
Thank you very much.
Matt, how many years have you served on the Waterways Committee?
I'm approaching 20.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I forgot to ask if there are any openings.
That's I hate that question. He and I are the same age. It makes us feel old.
He started when I was 14.
Historic District and Historical Commission.
Good evening, Mary Maslowski, Chairperson of the Historic District and Historical Commission. Mr. Hart gave me a tough act to follow with the report. You should all have a copy of our letter to you. Throughout this year, the Historic District and Historical Commission has continued its work to try and preserve and protect both historic structures and historic district within the town. We have had 17 hearings on notices of intent for demolition. Those are all properties that are covered by our historic inventory. In addition, we've had 4 historic district certificates and 6 requests for determination, and those are typically what comes before us when a resident is unsure or is hopeful that the demolition delay bylaw does not apply to either their structure or an ancillary structure on their property. So we've had 6 of those as well. In addition, I would just like to comment that in this year, we did also work with the Recreation Commission with their permitting of and their relocation of the new pavilion. And also, we just permitted, it's a little outside the scope of the report, but we did just permit, give them a certificate of appropriateness for the new restrooms to go in at Brooks Park.
Thank you, Mary. Larry?
Excuse me. Thanks for that report. You mentioned that you've completed at least the initial inventory of historic properties. Could you speak to that? And
Sure.
is that inventory available to the public?
It is, the building department does have a copy of it. We have it online. It's also a 4-volume set that we did print out, and CPC was given a copy of it. I believe the building department does have it on electronic copy. So it's quite lengthy. It provides the most recent update that was completed, and we had a meeting on it within the past few months that has been implemented, and that is the current list that we're using, and that was derived from the first round of CPC funds. There is a second round that the HTHC needs to move forward with.
Okay. And how will you use this? Will this be used to prioritize? Will it be, we've been after this for a long time.
As far as
Inventory.
the second round of funds?
Well, the first one, no, the inventory itself.
So the inventory list is what we look to when it comes to a demolition delay. We have a demolition delay bylaw within the town. So any property that is listed on that historic inventory, which is 100 years of age or older, automatically has to come to the Historic District and Historic Commission with a notice of intent before any demolition of any portion of the structure can be done. So currently it reads that if you had a house that was over 100 years of age and you wanted to add a garage, and that included demolishing, even just cutting a door into part of the original structure, the building department would require you come to the Historic Commission for a hearing and a determination before you get issued your building permit. So that's the way it's drafted, and that's the way in which we technically use that historic inventory list.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Julie?
And technically, though, we only have one historic district in Harwich, right? Harwich Center.
Correct.
Yeah. And out of the 17 notices of intent for demo, how many were demoed? Do you know?
So we granted, I don't recall us having actually denied one.
Okay.
There was one over off of Harbor that I believe we had, I'm not sure on whether we granted it or whether they were okay with the changes that we had made to their application, because they weren't going through the demolition process immediately.
Okay.
But most of them have been smaller. We've had a few full demolitions, one off of Queen Anne Road. Most of them have been, have a fallen down porch that needed to be demolished so that they could replace it with an additional structure or
Okay.
a larger addition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Gino?
Where are the bathrooms going at Brooks Park? Just curious.
They're going over, if memory serves, it's over by the pavilion. It's in that area,
On the other,
by
like,
the tennis courts.
further where the new shed is?
I
or
believe so. I'm trying to picture it in my head from the,
from the diagram?
exactly, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but
No
I
problem,
do believe
it's-
it was over by the pavilion, because I don't believe it's over by the bandstand.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming here, and congratulations on being the new chair this year.
Thank you.
My tack is kind of going to be different from the other folks. I'm the liaison of the Community Preservation Committee. Last year, there seemed to be a real big disconnect where there was this inferential rule that isn't published anywhere on their part, and I've had this discussion with them, that if they're using other committees as a vetting mechanism, that the other committees should probably know that that's what they're being used for. And as a new chair, I'm urging everybody that was involved with that to make sure that they network with them when they do get rules that are transparent and are on the internet, because if indeed you're supposed to go with a request for CPC funds, if they're historic, they got to go through you first for a recommendation. You need to know that so that you can appropriately agenda this and give a recommendation. But they need to know what you're capable of doing too. They last year they turned down a town hall request for historic records. They sent that to historical commission because there were two commissions that kind of collided together. But I always viewed them as building centric. That's what your real charge is, to preserve our heritage with fixed assets. So in saying absent a recommendation from the historical commission to agree to that request, which I didn't think you had the wherewithal to make, they presumed that you were turning it down. So I'm going to urge you to make sure that you get together with the CPC so that they know what you're capable of doing and what the expectations are.
So I'm happy to report that Ellie Sabatino, our town planner, did shepherd that process for us this year. And working with town administration and the department head meetings, she advised everyone if they did in fact have a CPC application to provide it to her. We actually had that meeting at our last meeting on September 17th, 18th, forgive me for the date, but we actually reviewed all of the applications of people that wanted them to come before us. I do believe some people may have chosen not to, but we did receive 7 different applications that we reviewed and took separate votes on as to whether we supported or not. So I'm happy to say that the town records applications, and there were 2, one for the building at the community center and also the one for here in Town Hall, those were both received the support of the Historic Commission.
And happy to hear that, but I'm just saying that in the future, if they happen to want something that you can't provide, that everybody needs to be in contact, because we all work for somebody outside of this
Agreed.
building.
Fortunately, that process was very smooth this year, thanks to town staff.
Terrific.
Thank you, Mary. How many vacancies do you have? 2.
2, yes.
Take the pitch.
Making the pitch. On the 6 requests for determinations,
Yes.
how many of those were on the current list?
Each
All-
of them,
Every one of them?
every one of them was on the current list.
So if they're on the list, what do we need the determination for?
So it was our effort to try and smooth, make the process a little bit easier for some of the town residents. The application to actually have your notice of intent, for some people, when they were coming in to actually get a building permit, there wasn't time enough for them to get on the first meeting. So say they came in May 5th, they couldn't publish in time to get a notice of intent hearing scheduled for the May meeting. They'd be postponed to the June meeting. So what we tried to do in those questionable circumstances, where one of them, I believe, was the laundromat on Doan, that was a circumstance where there was a typo. It was actually on our list. We invited them to come to the meeting ahead of the actual meeting that they could make with a public hearing. So we let them come to us, and we reviewed their information and made a determination. If we didn't believe it was properly on the 100-year list, then we took a vote to remove it from the list, and that allowed them to proceed without having to have another month delay with for a notice of intent hearing. So, for example, that had happened with 19 Schoolhouse, which they were before the planning board. They came to the Historic Commission to see if, with deed records that evidenced a mortgage deed that predated, I want to say it was deeded in the 50s or in the 60s, that showed the building was built certainly not in 1915. So they were not properly on the 100-year list, so we removed them from the list, and then they didn't have to continue delaying their building permit for another month.
Thank you for working on making the application easier.
We're trying.
So round 2, you mentioned that of CPC funding to further update properties on the current list. I imagine that means make sure that there's none on there that shouldn't be on there like that one?
That's what we're hoping. Originally, I think the thought was to do more in-depth research in certain clusters, but where we have found a number of, I don't want to call them errors, but a number of properties that for valid reasons appear on a list, but we don't believe they belong there. Some deed research may be helpful in kind of removing some of those questionable properties. So it's one of the items on our agenda to discuss with town staff to see what's the best approach for the next round of monies as far as preparing a request for proposals.
Okay.
And then if it differs significantly from, I haven't reviewed exactly what the last request was, how it was pitched to CPC, we'd obviously make sure that it's in compliance with what we had requested from CPC, and if for some reason people don't think that's appropriate, then we would of course go back.
Great. Thank you, Mary. That's it for me. Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, real estate and open space, rescheduled from 9:25. And I don't see anyone from real estate and open space here, so you all have it in your packet, their report. If you have any questions, we can ask through the liaison, but I would say we probably won't be rescheduling because of our current schedule. So, any questions on that we want to get?
Thank you.
So next up, Community Development Partnership and Cape Housing Institute. Andrea?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Andrea Aldana. I'm the Director of Housing Advocacy at the Community Development Partnership, which is a nonprofit helping people live, work, and thrive on the Lower Cape. And I'm here to talk to you about a new program that we've launched called the Cape Community Housing Partnership, which is designed to increase the capacity of towns to meet the housing needs of their residents. We've partnered with Housing Assistance Corporation to offer this community-based strategy that will both build public support for affordable housing and equip municipal officials and community members with the knowledge and skills they need to support the creation of more affordable housing in the region. And we're going to do this in 3 ways. The first way is through a Cape Housing Institute, which I'll talk about more in a minute. The second way is through an advocate training, which will launch in January of 2018. And the advocate training is designed to empower low to moderate income residents, business leaders, and community members to engage in public hearings and town meetings to support projects as they arise. The third and final component is a public education campaign, which will launch in March of 2018. We're going to use print, broadcast, and social media to promote the true face of our neighbors who live in or need affordable housing and dispel inaccurate stereotypes about them. But what I really want to do tonight is to invite you all to attend our upcoming Cape Housing Institute, which starts next week on October 11th and 12th. So the Cape Housing Institute is a 6-part series of workshops designed specifically for members like yourselves of select boards, planning boards, zoning boards, community preservation committees, housing committees, housing trusts, housing authorities, and any town staff who are directly involved in decision-making related to affordable housing. We're going to use local examples and Cape Cod case studies to cover a wide range of topics related to housing development. So in session 1, we're going to offer an introduction to housing. We'll talk about what does affordability even mean. We'll give an overview of Chapter 40B, and the Cape Cod Commission will do an overview of the results of their recent housing market study. In session 2, we'll cover planning and needs assessment. So how do you get beyond a housing production plan to develop a comprehensive housing supply strategy to meet the current and future needs of residents at all income levels? Session 3 will cover zoning and site selection. We'll look at the current housing types in our region and think about the types of housing that are missing, and then the whole range of zoning options available to help us fill those gaps. In session 4, we'll cover financing and development. Specifically, what do you need to know to keep a project economically feasible to developers so that you're attracting the type of development that you want in your town, and also the natural points of interaction between towns and developers. In session 5, we'll make the case for affordable housing. We'll talk about messaging, common myths and stereotypes that arise, and how to build a compliant and high-quality RFP. And in session 6, we'll look at the future and next steps. We'll talk about regionalism and how towns can leverage limited resources to solve common problems and how other towns in Massachusetts have already successfully done this. Each session will be offered 4 times in locations across the Cape to make it really, really easy for everyone to attend. And like I said, it starts next week, so if anyone is interested in registering, we ask that they register by this Wednesday, October 4th. I believe there's a flyer in your packet, but you can get more information on our website at capecdp.org.
Thank you, Andrea. Questions from the board, Janelle?
It looks great. I'm just curious if we're sending anybody? You, okay,
I
I'm going.
registered too.
You did.
that's great.
Julie, comments?
No, I think it's great. I look forward to it, you know, and I'm glad that it's right here in Harwich. It makes it really convenient. Thank you.
Larry?
I applaud your efforts.
Thank
We
you.
certainly need housing. You know, we've talked in the last few weeks about economic development. Affordable housing is key to that. We had the school report, and as Julie pointed out, we're losing population of young kids. Affordable housing is key to that, and we have a lot of discussion going on in town, so it's a great effort.
Thank you. Don?
I'm going to start out with a disclosure. I'm the vice president of HESH, but there's no conflict here because we don't compete with each other in any way. We're more complementary. To that point, about what everybody had said, I had specifically, if it ever had come up, was going to recuse myself here as a discussion about the HESH Habitat House, but it gave me the opportunity to be at the ZBA meetings for 8 sessions. For my last term on Board of Selectmen, I've been saying that the regulatory boards, we have no policy on this, but the regulatory boards should require education on the laws they're administering for the state so that they could better understand what they're supposed to be doing on behalf of the citizens here. And it seemed abundantly clear to me that at least 3, if not 4 members of the ZBA said that they had never had any experience with a comprehensive permit. So I would urge us, even without a policy, to make sure that the ZBA members particularly attend this session, because it should, understanding what the state's laws on 40B are would be a big help for them to understand whether or not they're acquiescing to somebody who couldn't build that if they were doing it under 40A, because that's exactly the point. You're being given something to be allowed to get more density for worker affordable housing, and without that kind of understanding of what the law is, you start saying, why would I give this to you? So I would urge that they go, and that we recommend that for the ZBA members particularly.
Thank you, Don. In this class, is this more driven towards 40B and such projects, or is it local initiative programs, or a combination of both?
It's a combination. We're definitely going to be covering Chapter 40B because it's so important to the conversation. So that's going to be something, like I said, we'll do an overview in the intro session in week 1. It's going to keep coming up during every session, but this is really designed to be a Cape Cod-specific institute. It mirrors the annual Housing Institute that's offered by Massachusetts Housing Partnership every year, which people attend from across the entire state. In fact, MHP and the Cape Cod Commission worked with us very closely on the curriculum. So this is really sort of the annual institute made specific for Cape Cod, relevant to your work.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
No, she did a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good luck with it.
Next up, Board of Selectmen FY19 budget message. There's copies on the back table for anyone that didn't get one. They were not in the packet. They were in the Dropbox. I was a little late putting it in. Friday I got it in, so we printed copies and put them on the back page. So the board, you've had the weekend to digest the budget message, and now I'll open it up for comments. Larry.
I think it looks good. I had one comment that's it's probably not very practical, but I put in a comment that it'd be good to have some type of revolving fund, whether it's like we do for highways, a certain fund that goes in every year as a maintenance fund. And I don't know, as an override, actually. I don't think that's practical in our, we're trying to watch budget numbers, but the point I was trying to get at is that through the years I've been with the board, we've always have lacked funds to do proper maintenance. And it's, you know, so it's gotten, you know, we do better, but it's always kind of a squeaky wheel. So what I'm struggling with is how do we as a town set aside money to be sure we can keep up with our maintenance issues. You know, it's a budget item that we struggle with, but it's one of those things that we don't, we have examples where that thing's going, all of a sudden it costs us more in the long run. So that's why I put that in, Michael, that knowing that it wasn't that practical, but I wanted to get that discussion on the table.
Sure. Julie?
First of all, I think it looks really good, and thank you very much for all that time and energy spent on it. I in particularly liked the idea that, you know, we're revisiting what we talked about last year, which is looking at level staffing. We know that can be difficult, but I think it's important. I also like the idea of trying to figure out, you know, create a wastewater reserve fund. We also know we're going to be facing, you know, increasing costs as a town. And the idea of the sharing or trying to strategize about how to better use our vehicles, et cetera, sometimes those are some of our biggest costs, you know, when we get hit with certain things. So I think that's important too. And overall, anything that we can do for health insurance, although I think, unfortunately, that we'll continue to struggle at. But thank you. I think it looks really good.
You know?
Yeah, I can't improve on it at all. I think you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple aspects of this. The first one is that of note in here is the use of the capital plan. I feel kind of the same way as you're addressing this, is that much as you're not allowed to take a legitimate need and break it into smaller pieces so you can thwart the procurement laws, you're not really supposed to take widgets and add them all together so you can get to the size of a capital expenditure. So it's really important that we start looking at things that are really purchase requests and not aggregate them so you can make a bundle of capital money. And to what Larry was saying as a second issue, yeah, I mean, there's 160 million reasons in the tech school and 60 million reasons in the high school why you'd want to maintain the buildings that you got. And it's kind of important for us to figure out how we can nurture those. I mean, I went to a high school that still exists there, and it was built in 1918. It's been through 3 refurbishments, but it's been maintained, and it's state-of-the-art, but it's still the same Tudor-looking building that it was in 1918. We don't do that. It looks like it's easier for us to break it into a bonding issue, tear down the old one and build a new one than it is to maintain the one we got.
Thank you, Don. Larry, just a point on yours. I felt like I covered in 5 with not so many words. Revolving funds, I think we've gotten in the habit now of making as many revolving funds as we can. I'm a little, you know, I'd like to say that my message in all of my writing basically is we need to slow down.
Yeah.
And we need to stop spending money at the rate we're spending money. And I get the need to maintain, and I think for years we didn't maintain, and we certainly let ourselves get to a place. Chris has done a great job through Link and Sean Libby doing assessments and taking money out of other people's budgets, their maintenance line items, and building the maintenance budget. And every year that seems to go up. Last year it went up in the form of a plumber and some more money to fix. So I think it's there, and I'm just...
I appreciate that. I think that, and I agree with that. I also appreciate that I did, in my version, delete, I think you put in major projects, and that was referring to what Don mentioned. Somehow we need some money we can go after the little things before they become major. And that's in here as well.
And looking over the capital, it just so happens the capital request, the start of it is in tonight's packet, and we're looking at 24 million in wastewater. So, or 22 million in wastewater. And I think if we're going to create a fund this year, we best create a fund to start paying for the wastewater system, because that's the one that's really going to sneak up and whack us. Jack?
Hi, Jack Brown, Chairman of the Finance Committee, but here speaking right now for myself, since I've not yet had a chance to meet with the Finance Committee on this. I got 4 or 5 thoughts and concerns. just seeing it for the first time. One is I believe that item number Roman numeral 2 about staffing, I think it's really essential that we be explicit in our budget discussions related to staffing as a topic in and of itself versus, oh yeah, that's in the budget, or it's a half person, it's in the budget. We've got to be talking about specifically in each and every department. Okay, generally not been rigorous at that level.
Are you talking about reduction, or are you talking about increase?
I'm talking about increases or decreases.
Okay. Because I think we've
If
covered,
nothing's changed,
we've
then
covered
we could-
increases.
We could consider talking about it, but, you know, the bias is toward increases, we gotta watch that,
When that, okay, so
and you've addressed that some. The second thing is that it's good to see maintenance in number 5. It's an area where we tend to think that somehow maintenance get done without money or people. That hasn't worked very well at all, and we have to deal with that. The third thing is item 7, the value and create a wastewater reserve fund. I have 2 concerns. One is it's another fund area that we've got to find money for. But importantly also, this right now doesn't really deal with stabilization fund. It does talk briefly about OPEB, which is good, but the other fund that really matters is stabilization. And so if we really need to create a new one, we're creating additional difficulty in funding things that we know we already are trying to get in the budget each and every year and struggling with, OPEB and stabilization. The more time I spend on this stuff, I think those 2 are awfully more important than the way we're funded them. The last thing I would note at this moment is that we should consider aggressively whether there's any value in leasing versus buying on our capital equipment. Sometimes it's a good idea to lease, sometimes it isn't. It's important that we understand case by case which it is, okay? The Highway Department does a great job of dealing with the equipment the town owns after we own them. The question is, should we own them or should we just lease them? Okay? So that's the first shot, Michael.
thank you.
Thank you.
So the, Jack, I just want to, I got to find it, but the wastewater reserve fund, I guess I'll just touch on that. You know, I think that that's going to be a collective effort between Finance Committee, Administration, Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
We're going to have to find a source to fund wastewater.
Exactly.
So specifically, I didn't think we should put in that we're going to take a percentage of anything, any number at this point, but we need to look at everything.
Yeah, and I just wanted to alert us to, by the way, there's OPEB and stabilization as well we got to fund.
As far as the OPEB and stabilization, OPEB, we have defined some sources, and it is mentioned. Stabilization, I think it was at least my intent that we're not going to spend the free cash until we know what the free cash number is, and then decide where we're going to. And Chris always has a line item for stabilization. Last year, I think we fell short of a good number, but in my mind, when we look at our free cash number this year, that's when the capital outlay, Finance Committee, and Board of Selectmen needs to put its 2 cents in as
Right.
far as what goes where and what we do without,
Right,
quite
thank you.
frankly.
That's promising.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Dana, all set? Good. Thank you. Does the board want to vote that?
I'd move that we accept it as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded to accept the Board of Selectmen FY19 budget message. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Old Business Community Preservation Committee articles. Charlene, I put this on for Chris to kind of give us an overview. In the packet is a list of town CPC articles.
Yes, and if I might, let me get my notes.
I believe today was the deadline.
Today was the deadline. I know that several came in last week. I don't know exactly how many. Bless you. There are 9 sitting downstairs right now, waiting for pickup by the chair. So I would say we're somewhere around anywhere from a dozen to 15 applications that got submitted. There are a couple that were not going forward, and I'm trying to find the list.
Me
Here
too.
we go. The West Harwich School, that one was not going to go forward. And the Recreation Commission did pull the new scoreboard for White House Field, so those two aren't in there. There have been additional ones added, however. The Harbor is submitting an application for compliance with ADA. Matt Hart, I don't know if he's still here, he's not here, the chair of that, the Waterways Committee had attempted to get a grant through a component in the state for ADA to help with that. Was not able to get it, so they have made application to see if they can get CPC funds to assist with that. I can't think of any other town ones that may have cropped up, but there are certainly others from different entities that have submitted.
And it seems, I went to some of the meetings that you guys pitched some of the town ones at. It seems like there's been good support from the committees.
So far, so good. Yeah, the going to the historic group was actually a very good meeting. That was, we were delighted with the support we got at that meeting. You were at the meeting where, with the Housing Authority, where we discussed with them support of the Housing Trust and the hiring of a housing coordinator, either on our own part-time or coordinating with Chatham, Brewster, and Orleans to hire a full-time person. That was actually voted to be supported by the Housing Authority. We were very delighted with that. And the Housing Committee had already voted to support that. So far, yeah, we're very pleased with the support that we've received
Great.
on all the applications thus far.
Great. Don, questions? Janelle?
No, looks good.
Julie?
No, I don't have any.
Larry?
No.
All set?
Did you have any questions on the monies that are available at this
No,
point?
that was in there for informational purposes.
Yes.
I had been asked by several people how much money was in each bucket, so I thought that that was a good,
Okay.
was a good number to have in there. At least people can understand what we have for money and what we're thinking of spending. Carol, maybe you could answer just one question on the money. Is there any, there's been questions asked that the money is still being looked at in several categories as to whether the accuracy, I'm not, it was news to me, but I think CPC, one of the CPC members asked if that was factual numbers. Apparently last year they came forward with some numbers they thought it was gonna be. Do you know of any discrepancies?
Carol Coppola, I'm the finance director for the town of Harwich. I have been doing significant amount of research on articles. At one point, the town had budgeted those articles for CPC or community preservation in the general fund. For a number of years, the external auditors had recommended that they move forward into their own fund, in which that did start. It began about 2013 or 14. However, the old articles were still in the general fund. So I've combed through all of them. I believe I've identified all of them now, and the latest ones identified, honestly, were last week.
Great.
And so I moved all those forward into the most appropriate fund, and I believe that it is all
Great.
set.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that work. Janelle?
I just have one question, Charlene, about the Albro House application. What does that entail?
What this is an assessment of the condition of the building and what would need to happen. I contacted, because I'm doing that application. We originally had $12,500 in there to have an engineer look at it and do some different things. I was asked to have other entities, housing inspectors, look at it. We actually came in with a price at about $2,500 to have the septic looked at, the electric, the plumbing by folks in that field, and then also do an assessment of the building to see, regardless of what the future use may be of that building, there is more than likely work that's going to need to be done, whether by the town or, if the town decides it wants to dispose of the property, what somebody else may have to do to bring that house up to a standard, that structure up to a standard. So no decisions have been made on what the use of the house is, the building. So what this would be is just a general assessment of what needs to happen in that building to ensure if it's going to stay what it is, which is offices for human service type needs and our youth counselor, whether we're going to rent it out for other types of office use and move the youth counselor someplace else, whether we do a long-term lease, what's going to need to take place in that building to afford the opportunity for that to happen, or even to, if it's decided, let's turn it into housing. What would need to be done with that. We do know through some of the research that I have done that it is approved right now for only a 3-bedroom house. So if any other changes were to be made, septic system upgrades would have to take place, that kind of thing. So it's just basically to see what's going on with the house now, what needs to happen with it, and get a laundry list of things that may need to take place over there.
Same basic article as last year that they didn't consider.
Same basic article, although this time, instead of going with an engineer, because we did hear a lot of feedback from folks through the whole process, boy, that's a lot of money, somebody should be able to do this for less. So we are doing it for less. What we're not going to be getting in this process is a schedule of future work on the building that the engineer was going to put together. That won't happen with the $2,500. That part of it would not happen, but the basic assessment would.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you. No other questions on the money? All set. New business, open meeting law complaint. This is just to alert the public. We did receive an open meeting law complaint by none other than Ron Beatty. We had changed an agenda. All the information is in the packet tonight. We had put a revised agenda in the day after we posted the agenda. I believe it was 2 weeks ago, the 14th.
The meeting of
14th.
September,
18th.
It was the 18th.
18th?
yeah.
The 14th was the posting time.
Right.
But
Okay.
the meeting
Yeah,
was
so we
for- it was this-
posted on the 14th.
Right.
We changed it on the 15th.
Actually, it was, if I might, it was actually changed on the website on the 14th, like an hour later, but it did not get to the town clerk on the 14th.
And the change, just so everyone's aware, was in the consent agenda, there was a line item G, approve award of contract for Saquotucket Marina Septic System, and we removed that. Charlene has put together a response to the open meeting law complaint, and there's a letter in the packet. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the public, I mean, I've filed open meeting law complaints myself in the past, people who are trying to dodge this. The point of the open meeting law is to allow everybody to know that if something's of interest to them, that they can hop in a car and go down and look at it, so it has to be transparent. Had this been done differently, had this actually been left on the agenda and we got to a meeting and Michael had said, we're not going to be discussing this tonight, there wouldn't have been anything to complain about. And what's odd about this, from somebody who seems to be making a career out of making these complaints, is this isn't about trying to tell people about what you're going to be doing and not informing them in the proper way. This is about already putting them on notice that you're going to do something and then deleting it off of that. So the public knows that this wasn't about trying to slip something through. This was actually deleting something. And I can't believe that this whole process, which is involving considerable time and expenditure at the town level, is anything but frivolous.
Thank you, Don.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, one of the interesting things when Chris asked me to investigate this was through my research is that we actually didn't violate the open meeting law or the regulation at all. What we, and I don't want to say we omitted information, that we erred, it's just in the guide, there are specific things in the guides, which is quite a, it's 30-plus pages long. So certainly the spirit and intent of the open meeting law was not violated, in my opinion. And it was just a matter of, we neglected to either strike out, or the other thing that the guide suggests is that you also include what the original posting date and time was on the new posting if you're going to revise it. so.
Well, it was a first, and we learned from it, and we won't do it again.
And I hope the letter I put together meets with
Yes,
the
do
board's.
we want to vote on that letter? Can I get a motion to approve Charlene's response to the open meeting? Okay.
And authorize.
Second.
You didn't.
And authorize the chair to sign?
Second.
That was the motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
You have a person from the audience that wants to.
Oh.
Just a very brief comment. Welcome to my world.
I've been following it.
This has a real cost.
I know, I've been following it. I believe he filed over 100 last year. Wastewater Support Committee membership discussion. We put this on, Janelle had asked me for this originally, sitting on the interview committee as we're interviewing for this new Wastewater Support Committee. She wanted a little bit of direction as far as who we wanted to put on there, and not specifically, but what questions we're gonna ask and what level of expertise these people should have. So, here we are. Janelle, any more of a summary than
I'm
I
gonna
just gave?
defer to Larry,
Larry?
because he's the one who really came up with the new charge,
Wow.
and I think it was Larry who suggested that we have parameters, so I'm gonna defer to you.
I did get that, I think, you want to question that about, and so in thinking about it, I put together a list of what I call strengths based on experience to be considered for the nomination to the wastewater support committee. And as guidelines, I have, and these are dot points, not in any particular order, but I think it's important that this person has an understanding of the issues and goals of the comprehensive wastewater management plan. Spent a lot of time on that. They have experience, and we feel comfortable with them on their outreach, their ability to do outreach and listen to residents, Don. I put a criteria for education. It's always good to have someone that knows how to educate the public, because this is a complicated process we're going through. I think some information on program management, because we're asking them to keep track of the CWMP required, deadlines. I'm not asking program management in terms of managing a project, but of being sure we're in line with the CWMP. We've been asking that they're at least cognizant on seeking grant money and funding. So I put a criteria, or at least a strengths of having some government business financial background, grant writing, funding mechanisms. And I put this as kind of a wishy statement, I guess, but as much as possible, consider the applicant pool to select members based on balance, demographics, town location, background. And I listed these as strengths. I would hope that when we consider these persons, they at least fulfill at least one of these, and hopefully more than one of our strengths for the nominating committee. So these aren't hard and fast, but taking the question to heart, I thought it'd be good to list some, what I think are important factors.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for that work. Julie?
No, I think that's a great start, Larry. I think you've kind of touched upon all the items we talked about last time when we were trying to dig down and figure out how we would, create the committee and what it needs. And I think a bunch of these are education and the experience, and then the demographics, and of course, anybody we can get with any kind of grant writing would be excellent. Yeah, so no, great stab at it. Good job, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was concerned, too. We went to the meeting, and just so everybody knows, for the candidate we did interview, we talked about the need to be able to engage the public, and perhaps their meetings would be better at night than during the day. We did talk about the ability not just to sell the plan, but to have a partnership with the community so that they were interacting with it, and they were part of the process, not like on the outside. So I think we intuitively knew. The only question I think we all had, and this is the proper place to ask it, my assumption was that we weren't just going to be putting the band back together again. If we were dissolving the other committee, we were looking at skill sets and some other things, demographics, that were going to be considered. That wouldn't preclude anybody who was serving in the past. Maybe they do fit that criteria, but we weren't just going to recreate that, because if that was the intent, we would have just altered the charge and let them continue to serve. So just for the public's edification, we may or may not wind up with some people from the old committee, but there's a new criteria that's been developed, and they have to meet that.
Julie?
Actually, and to follow up on that, the other thing when we talked about this initially too was, education, which you already have in here, but I'm wondering if, whatever way this committee works and whoever we get on it, if we even hold sort of meetings throughout town. I don't know if we can do that, but, in terms of figuring out a good location so that we've got people coming in to say, well, I have this question, that question, some of which we're not even thinking of right now because, we're not in it. But when we talked last time, we talked about, people are asking how they go about this and do they get their own construction contractor and how, all these different questions. And they're all great questions. So I'm just wondering, maybe we do figure out local meetings, even though we can say community center, it might be nice to try to figure out something in an area.
Okay. Anything further on that? I don't think we have to take any votes on that. It's just a suggestion, clarification.
Thank you.
All right. Town Administrator's Report, Charlene.
Okay, you have in your packets the schedule for the capital budget presentations to the Capital Outlay Committee, the first one being tomorrow night. You also have in your packet a draft of the capital budget plan thus far. Chris has already begun to meet with department heads, and there's already been some changes. He and I kind of crossed paths late this afternoon, so I don't have the particulars on what those changes are. But as you know, seeing this, year after year, it's an ever-changing document. So we will keep you informed. The meetings are open. 4:30 tomorrow or 4 o'clock tomorrow is the first meeting next door in the small meeting room. I also wanted to let you know that the coastal sweep was held this past Saturday. Amy Usowski and Nikki Smith from the Conservation Office reports that 47 people attended. They collected over 200 pounds of garbage over 8 miles. So they cleaned a lot. There are 20 bags of garbage plus several heavy, large things that couldn't go in bags. Some of the interesting things they found were a grocery cart, which apparently was filled with returnables.
Bonus.
A full backpack, which was returned to its owner. Bird bath pieces and clothing. I'm not really going to ask about that one. There was a lot of beach and water toys that were found, people leaving things, nips and other alcoholic containers, which unfortunately is not surprising. We believe we collected 1 full bag of nips, most of which came from Bell's Neck. So it was very successful. Amy Usowski shared with me a number of photographs that they took, and very important project, a lot of good for the community, showed a lot of community, but they also had a lot of fun doing it in the process. So that was very successful. And that, I believe, is all that I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Larry?
Charlene,
and the
it might
department weekly reports.
might be interesting and fun to put some of the pictures on the website.
I will ask Amy to do that.
Julie, any questions on that?
No, not on that.
Janelle?
Do you recall if any children were there?
There were some youngsters there from the picture that I was sent. Yeah, there were.
Thank you.
I think it ranged in age from probably 10 to probably 80-something.
Okay. Julie, questions on the department reports?
Yeah, I just had, just looking through them, there's a lot of great information in here, and I was just looking specifically at the building department, and I don't know if it's a typo, but it looked like a massive increase in sign applications, so I don't know. I'm just curious. I jumped to like 27, 2014, 32, 2015, 41, 2016, and 224.
I think that's the total for the year as of, I don't know, I'll find out about that. I know that the building commissioner has been getting in touch with folks about signage
Okay.
and
so-
getting them to get into compliance and do the right thing.
Gonna say, as long as your any increase is probably good.
Oh, and Cindy's been doing a lot of work bringing businesses into town, too, so.
That's true.
All right, sorry,
But I will definitely
Why is that funny? It's
find
true.
out.
I know. She is doing a great job. Selectmen's report, goals and objectives. I put them in the packet again, just as an informational. I had them in last week. Julie asked a question tonight. We're really not gonna go over these again, are we? It's a reminder,
Done deal.
our names are next to things. There's a certain amount of stuff that we committed to doing as a board.
We'll
that
be
it-
living them.
Yeah, so please keep an eye on the ones that your name's next to.
Mr. Chairman, last year we had done the action item register.
Yes.
We can do that again, but not with the detail that's in the goals and objectives, because that would just, as the one doing that work, would send me over the edge. We can do a shorter reference to the full table.
I think we did that last year the same way, and I think it worked great.
So, okay, I will do that then.
So an abbreviated version,
And
but we'll keep
a
the...
much abbreviated with the reference back to the table itself.
Thank you. Budget warrant timeline is in here also, just as an informational piece. There's dates on here, meetings, extra meetings that we're having. We hit all the October 2nd ones. October 30th, Capital Outlay Committee submits its 7-year capital outlay plan to the town administrator. That's the next one up. Questions or anything on the timeline from any board members?
No.
All set. Vacancy listing is in here.
Was that updated?
It was asked that it was updated, I'm not sure, I'm just looking for the one. Yes,
October.
wastewater support. So for the public, we have 20-plus openings. Nell, any comments, questions?
Yes, municipal revenue and economic development needs people, please.
Don?
This is just more for the knowledge of the board members. Even with this, every time we make an appointment, I'm referring back to Anita and looking at both the site, our book, and who got sworn in, so that I can make absolutely certain that we're placing somebody in a real vacancy in a real year.
Good.
Charlene, Building Code Board of Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like it's totally empty.
Yeah.
There's a redundancy there.
Don, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, after Mr. Kodak passed away, there really hasn't been a very robust committee. That actually was something that developed based on the premise of that doesn't look good. It's really been more or less supplanted by the planning board and the ZBA, and the fact that it's not populated has not actually stalled anything. And it may very well behoove us to consider whether we want to continue having such a committee.
And I'm not sure if that's a statutory, state law type committee, or whether it's a town committee.
Folded in.
Can we put
Yeah.
that, try and put that information together for the next couple
Sure.
weeks, and I'll put it back on the agenda? Ed?
Actually, the building code, how
Board of
does it?
Appeals,
b-
Building
the
Code Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals is a provision of the building code, Massachusetts State Building Code, which you've adopted. And the purpose is to provide some means for a builder or an architect who is proposing something that doesn't meet the strict interpretations of the building code in building technology or engineering or whatever, if they've been denied by the local building official, to have some place to appeal it to.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't think we've had any appeals in
So I
my
guess-
history,
I guess we
but
need to know who acts in place of this, like our Ag Commission, we had the town
Mm-hmm.
administrator act in place of this. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, and to that point, that's what I was actually recommending, if those duties could be folded into the ZBA or the planning board.
Well, I know a lot of folks just go right to the state.
Yeah, or that, but I'm just saying, within the confines of the law, I'm pretty sure that we could handle it if the duties were delegated. They can't be gotten rid of.
no.
So Ed and I agree with that. It's just, how can we do that? Because we haven't populated that board in, like, a million years.
And you know, if you don't have it as a step, and somebody does go directly to the state, and you want to oppose it, you can say, well, they haven't gone through the proper channels, and which raises the question, well, how can I go through the proper channels if you don't have an appointed committee? You know, it's sort of
I
Appointing
honestly
it-
don't know of any town that has one of these anymore.
All right, I'll put it back on in the next couple weeks.
Okay,
Select-
we'll do some investigating.
Selectmen's report, Larry?
None.
Julie?
I just want to say that I attended the Housing Authority meeting.
Energy Committee, did you already do that one?
No, the Energy Committee, I talked about that last week, but we also have the Green, I asked for
I'm sorry, I didn't
the
mean to
Green
interrupt.
Community presentation. We're gonna.
Next week.
Yeah, we're gonna
Good.
have that.
Sorry.
Which I look forward to, that's gonna
Yes.
be good. So I attended the Housing Authority Committee Tuesday night, and which we saw them support the housing coordinator position in the trust, et cetera. So that was good news. Briefly, got to sit in on the planning board, just talked to a couple of the members, and, you know, had some good conversation there. So in terms of the accessory bylaw apartment, you know, that we talked about them rejecting originally, so hopefully we can revisit that. And I also just want to mention that the first annual Monomoy All Sports Booster Golf Tournament is to be held on Monday, October 9th, and they're still looking for people to participate. So get in touch with Monomoy High School and the Booster Club. Specifically, there are contacts online as well. But let me just say that the time is 8:30, shotgun start, Cranberry Valley, and it's $125 per player, but it is tax deductible. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Janelle?
I'm just wondering about the Ag Commission here. I don't have a selectman's report, but the Ag Commission, I thought we had 4 already, and I don't think it's an 8-member board, right? We need to look into that one, because I know we have 4. Maybe somebody hasn't been sworn in, but that's all.
Don?
Well, in the spirit of Julie's infomercial, the Site Loss Services does support groups in Harwich, along with other places, and there's going to be their major fundraiser dinner a week from Sunday, so if you want to log on to sitelostservices.org and become part of that fundraiser, it's a dinner to support the overall organization and the site loss support groups. Other than that, nothing.
And while we're on infomercials, October 20th is the big dance. So see Jack Brown and Richard Waystack for tickets to the big dance. That's to support the Council on Aging or the
Swing.
Chamber of Commerce.
Swing music.
So I just wanted to give kudos to the race committee from this weekend, and our public safety officials, and our DPW, and anyone else that was involved in that race that started at Monomoy and ended at Monomoy. The traffic, I got detoured properly. I didn't feel like anything was backed up. There was a lot of runners here. The grounds and all the signs were picked up pretty much immediately afterwards, and that was a great race. There was a lot of people in this town, so. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.